Uh, Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'd like to talk about Indian health policy in the light of COVID 19. So, COVID 19 is uh, uh, interesting in two ways. The first is it's important and interesting to understand what happened when the pandemic appeared here in India. But it's important to go deeper because this is a great moment. It's a great opportunity for us to understand about what is going on in the Indian health system. What has COVID 19 taught us about the strengths and weaknesses of the Indian health system? How has this experience changed our mind? And what should we be doing in terms of our institution building for the coming years? Now, in this, I want to emphasize the distinction and the separation between words that are often inappropriately conflated. These are the words public health and healthcare. Healthcare is about taking care of one person at a time. Healthcare is a private good. I am sick, I go get treated, I get better, I am the beneficiary. Healthcare is a private good. Public health is about population scale interventions. For example, you clean the air of North India, the entire population of North India becomes better off. So, what is the most important single public health initiative that you could do for North India? Could we clean the air for North India? Now, that's public health. So, public health is about activities that are directed at the population. Healthcare is about activities that are directed at one individual, and they involve completely different ways of thinking. So healthcare is a private good, public health is a public good, and we should be very careful in how we think about these things. And I'm going to use these kinds of concepts in my remaining 16 slides. Okay, so let's start at public health. As I said, public health is about population scale interventions. In the jargon of economics, this is about market failure in the form of public goods and externalities. These are things that private people will not be able to do on their own. You need public goods in the country, you have to solve externalities in the country, and this involves governments. Public health is mostly about prevention and not about cure. And most of the levers lie outside health ministries. For example, I just talked about air quality. The levers to deal with air quality are not there inside any ministry of health. And again, there's a word that is widely used in the field of health, which is primary care. Primary care is just healthcare. Healthcare is not public health. So we should be very careful. The business of prevention is public health, and that does not include primary care, which a lot of health people are excited about, but that's not a public good and that's not public health. Now, in the COVID 19 problem, there are 6 dimensions to public health: contact tracing, social distancing, testing, the statistical system, medical research, and the vaccines. Okay, so I'm going to run through all these 6 points. These are the 6 things that we have to understand in order to figure out COVID 19 in India. So let's get started. Contact tracing. How do you do contact tracing? It involves a large workforce which will go around, meet every individual who's been tested positive, talk to that individual, ask that individual, who did you meet in the last 1 week? Okay, that involves a sophisticated, complex conversation. And then you have to go meet all those people and keep on testing them, contact tracing them. That is contact tracing. This is a difficult capability to achieve under Indian conditions of state capacity. Vijay Kelkar and I have a classification system through which you can determine whether a given public administration problem is easy to solve or difficult to solve. This involves 4 tests. Okay, let's run through that for contact tracing. The first test is, do you have a lot of transactions? If there are a lot of transactions, it's difficult. If not, it's easy. Yes, contact tracing has a lot of transactions, so it's difficult. So far, the score is 1 out of 1. Okay. Question 2, does the frontline worker have a lot of discretion? No, the frontline worker in contact tracing is obeying a process manual. There's no great discretion. You just have to keep on doing the same thing over and over. Score 1 upon 2. So transactions is difficult, discretion is not difficult, 1 out of 2. Number 3, is it high stakes? Does the decision and the activity of the contact tracer make a big difference to the life of the citizen? Is it like a policeman talking to a citizen? Is it like an income tax officer talking to the citizen? Is it like a SEBI officer talking to the citizen? No, the stakes in contact tracing are very small. The life of the citizen cannot be significantly disrupted because of something that the contact tracing guy determines. Okay, the score 1 out of 3. Okay, finally, number 4, Do you have high transparency? Do you have low transparency? Okay, is this hidden in secrecy? So CBI is hidden in secrecy, national defense is hidden in secrecy, the investigation inside SEBI is hidden in secrecy, the trading activity of the Reserve Bank of India is hidden inside secrecy. No, contact tracing can be done completely in the open. You can have complete transparency, all the information can be visible. So there's no difficulty that comes from opacity. So bottom line, contact tracing scores 1 out of 4 in terms of the complexity. It is not a very difficult problem. It is possible to build contact tracing. There's just one weird problem that you don't see in many other situations in public administration, which is the dynamic size of the workforce. So in steady state, in India, you would probably have 1,000 people with expertise on contact tracing. But under high load conditions, such as the COVID-19 epidemic, you would want to go to something like a 500,000 contact tracers. So that's a peculiar twist that fundamentally contact tracing is easy, but you want the internal capability to be able to rapidly expand using a temp workforce and then be able to rapidly downsize that when the epidemic goes away, you want to get rid of all those people. Okay, so that's a unique problem about contact tracing. Now, when we look in the Indian landscape, there's a lot of heterogeneity. In places like Kerala and Tamil Nadu, contact tracing has been done relatively well. In most of India, there is not much contact tracing. For example, in Bombay, one of the best places in India in terms of management of the epidemic, there's not been a whole lot of contact tracing. Under these conditions, there was a lot of attraction that can you do this using an app. So the technologists tried to push that you should do an app and somehow the app will do contact tracing. And that is not correct. And today we know that there's not much use of the app in terms of actually generating useful information for contact tracing. Okay, number two, social distancing. In the field of social distancing, we are used to thinking of a lockdown that is driven by a decision of the government. Now, I feel we are not giving people enough credit. People are smart, people care about their own health. So, as long as there is good information, there is data, the data is communicated. So, the salient data is that you've got to tell me inside my PIN code what is the infection rate. In my PIN code, are there a lot of people who are infected with COVID 19? Therefore, am I likely to get infected with COVID 19? This is the important question, that if there is a high amount of COVID 19 in my neighborhood, then I am more likely to get infected. So I should be more careful. And then I will change my behavior. So the prime objective of social distancing should be that there should be data at the level of every single PIN code, which is updated weekly, which tells the individual inside the PIN code about how many people in my PIN code are affected. Then I'll know, is it safe to go down and have pani puri, or is it not safe to go down and have pani puri? On top of that, there can be a little bit of state coercion, a little bit of government pushing, but primarily, there's not much sensible role for a government in determining, because the infection varies dramatically place by place. There's no real one single Indian one size fits all, and really there are complex trade-offs. It depends on how poor you are. Okay, for all of us in this room, we are relatively affluent. We can afford to hide in our rooms and we are okay. For poor people, not having a livelihood is not a choice. So the amount of social distancing should vary by location and by prosperity, and really it deserves a highly decentralized approach, one with a lot of information and communication at the pin code level and a little bit of state coercion. That's the right way to do social distancing. Okay, number three, the testing problem. uh, the bulk of the testing capacity in India is in the private sector, and really the management capability to greatly increase testing when faced with a pandemic is there inside the private sector. At the same time, there is a market failure, which is asymmetric information. Okay, somebody claims that I'm doing a COVID-19 test for you. How do you know whether that test was actually done or they just took away your money? So ICMR was brought into a regulation problem, that how will we approve private labs that want to do testing for COVID-19? Now, this was a bit of a problem because ICMR is a lab. The DNA of ICMR is scientific research. ICMR is a bit like CSIR, is not a regulatory organization. There's a whole different rhythm of law and process design that should be used when you want to perform a regulation function, and this is a problem. Similarly, there is a role for government funding for testing, because the more people get tested, the more we will have sensible self-quarantining procedures and the spread of the epidemic will go down. So there are high externalities, and that market failure can be addressed by government setting up a voucher system for testing. So Basically, the government should be telling you and me that if you get tested, we will put up half the money or we will put up three quarters of the money. And that required a public procurement capability. The government needs to be able to run an auction and buy the services of private testing labs that do testing. And here we get stuck because in India, there is very low capability in public procurement. The government is not able to run auctions, run tenders, contract with private people, do contract management with private people. And this is where we got a bit stuck in terms of the implementation. Okay, the next big thing to think about is the statistical system. What, as I said already, in terms of social distancing, a central element of public health is the ability to calculate and release fine grained data. What you really need is the infection rate in every pin code every week. If you release this data, people will figure out what to do. Should I sell pani puri? Should I eat pani puri? This is a decision to be made by every individual, and that requires pin code level data of what is the infection rate, and this data has to be updated every week. It shouldn't be ancient data. So there's a lot of talk that we need more testing, but actually there are very different kinds of work that are going on in testing, and we should be careful to not mix up these things. So for example, there is testing that is a side effect of clinical protocols. So I feel some symptoms, I go to a doctor, the doctor prescribes a test. That data is not very useful because actually it does not convey what is going on in the population. To find out what's going on in a population, you need statistical sampling. So, we really need to get our heads around testing in a better way. And this takes us to the long-standing problems of the Indian statistical system as applied to health. For example, we need good quality deaths data. You look at the New York Times, they report a time series of the daily number of people who died in New York for other causes and for COVID 19. And then they are able to calculate what was the overall increase in the number of deaths on October the 24th, 2020 compared to October 24th, 2019. And then you're able to break down the excess deaths between COVID 19 and non COVID 19. And this requires very simple statistical machinery. Just watch all the cemeteries and all the crematoriums and count how many people die every day and release this data. So, Bombay needs to release daily data for the number of people who die in Bombay. And then suddenly we know a lot about what is going on in Bombay. Similarly, you need to be able to analyze the causes of death, but this requires a health statistical system. And these pillars of public health are not very much there in India. Next, I turn to medical research. Knowledge is the ultimate global public good. It's a public good in the sense that it's non rival and non excludable. My consumption of a research paper from a website in no way reduces your access to that same public good. So, knowledge is the ultimate public good. And in the case of COVID 19, India has been a great beneficiary of the mobilization by researchers all over the world on understanding the pandemic. So, for example, there was a global nonsensical debate around certain drugs that were claimed to work and then did not work, and the researchers nailed this pretty rapidly. We had some opinions about remdesivir, and now we think remdesivir doesn't work so well, and so on. So there's a lot of global research on understanding COVID-19, and we are getting all those papers. At the same time, there are India-specific questions which nobody else will pursue. For example, consider that a person already has subclinical or clinical tuberculosis. Okay, so India is the number one country of the world in terms of the presence of large scale tuberculosis in the population. So then you should ask that, hey, tuberculosis is a respiratory ailment. How does tuberculosis interact with COVID 19? That's a very India specific question. Nobody else is going to study it. And we need to kick off Indian research on doing these things. And there we ran into the problems that the machinery of medical research in India is really not well organized. It does not rapidly galvanize itself. The brain power, the firepower are limited. And so we've not got a whole lot of India specific research in this field. Then we come to the vaccines question. It is likely that some decent vaccines will come about. Okay, so there are about 160 vaccine projects going on all over the world. And it is likely that by March, April, May next year, some decent vaccines will happen. And we need to think more about how this will play out. Once good vaccines are there elsewhere in the world, what are we going to do? How will some persons in India achieve the intellectual property rights? How will the manufacturing be done? Will the government play some role in purchasing? Will the government play some role in financing? And I want to emphasize, you and I have 100% incentive to be private customers, to go buy a vaccine and become safer. So we don't have to think one for one. that the vaccines problem is purely a government problem. Vaccines are private goods. You and I are beneficiaries. We should go buy vaccines. Vaccines should be sold by private companies and so on. But on top of that, is there some role for government? What should the role of that government be? How will we achieve a large scale vaccine rollout on a population scale over and beyond what the hungry, profit motivated private sector will do for lots of people? And when there is a limited amount of money in the government system, how to prioritize? Would you rather give a vaccine to a policeman? Would you rather give a vaccine to a nurse? Would you rather give a vaccine to older people? Okay, how do we think of triaging scarce resources? These are the questions to be answered about the vaccines problem. For all the researchers in the room, we desperately need people to write high quality research papers on this question. There's very low knowledge on these kinds of things in the country today. So, what are the insights that we can offer for COVID 19 in this framework? Uh, it seems that there are basically six ideas that can be applied. The first is that there's a lot of gain by being more decentralized. There is a COVID 19 problem in Bombay. It is different from a COVID 19 problem in Pune. There's different from a COVID 19 problem in Nagpur. It's different from the COVID 19 problem in Lucknow, and so on. That you really need to think about the public health at a decentralized way. And there are a few public goods at the union government level. But primarily, this is a problem to solve at literally every city and every district in the country. The second thing to think about is state capacity for contact tracing. I already talked about contact tracing as a relatively easy state problem, and we in India need to learn how to build state capacity for contact tracing. The third thing is that the private sector is the dominant force in testing. And how can we address the market failure in testing? What role can government purchasing play by setting up a voucher system for testing and simultaneously fighting with the quality problems of the private sector? The fourth issue is the grant mechanism for research. For example, in the United States, by February, the United States government system was giving out grants to private universities, to private companies, to private researchers on doing research on questions of COVID 19 that are relevant for the overall society. That's how we bring the resources of the government to bear on the great problems of the age. If we only say that inside the Sarkari system, we have hired some scientists and they will do some research, we just don't get that level of dynamism. And the fifth thing I'd like to talk about is the statistical system in health. We really need better data. We need to know pin code by pin code, week by week, what is the infection rate. We need to be counting excess deaths. We need to be attributing deaths. How many people died because of COVID 19? How many people died because of non COVID factors? We need that kind of data all across the country so that we understand what is going on and we are able to constantly adjust and adapt our public policy strategies. And all this, number one, two, three, four, five, is going to require a systematic process for the construction of state capacity. And in this, the health community needs to learn from the state capacity community. There is a lot of knowledge in India today on how to build state capacity. And in the paper, there is a lot of this material. And this can and should be brought into the problems of health. Now I turn to healthcare. So far I was on public health. Now I turn to healthcare. So once you fail on prevention, so to the extent that the pandemic is not controlled, is not contained, then you are at the last barricade, which is of trying to cure people. Okay, in this, the most important thing to see is that there is a COVID 19 surge, and that surge is seen in one location after another all over the world, and it takes place at different dates in different cities. So, once again, we need the statistical system in health to be able to paint the curve for the COVID 19 epidemic in Lucknow. And then we have a sense of what is going on in terms of the healthcare requirement in Lucknow as opposed to the healthcare system capacity in Lucknow. Now, in these early 6 months of the epidemic, the bulk of the early response of healthcare took place in the government sector. And now we should be asking, how can we further augment the healthcare capacity so as to fare better in the surge? Once again, the bulk of existing healthcare capacity in India is in the private sector. But in the private sector, there is market failure. So we need to think more about how to harness private healthcare for the purpose of doing COVID 19. In these months, we've seen many interesting problems in the private healthcare organizations. We've seen that junior staff faced transportation constraints when the public transportation system broke down in places like Bombay. We've seen that the threat of infection was quite uncomfortable for many healthcare workers. We know that many healthcare workers did get sick. And we know that for private healthcare facilities, the amount of non-COVID-19 work and the cash flow of these organizations declined sharply. We need to think about these problems of private healthcare organizations because, frankly, private healthcare organizations are the mainstay of the Indian healthcare system, and we need to make sure that they're working well. In all this, it is very important to protect the healthcare workforce. We need thorough protocols to protect everyone down to the ward boy, not just protect the highly paid employees, but to protect everyone. We need to think about how we will do financial protection for healthcare workers in the event of sickness, and we need to solve their transportation constraints. In all this, can we do something more on healthcare financing? Can ESI play a bigger role in protecting ESI covered people when they get sick with COVID 19? Can the various government funded health insurance schemes work better? And in all this, once again, the key barrier is contracting. How can ESI and the GFHIS purchase COVID 19 healthcare from private healthcare providers? How can they achieve cost efficiency? How can they combat market failure? So, to conclude, the COVID 19 pandemic has been a giant stress test for the Indian health system. It's a good time where we've seen the system in action. We've seen some things that have worked well. We've seen some things that have not worked well, and we can think about what to do better. In this, it's very important to separate our minds between the field of public health, which is about prevention and containing the epidemic, versus the field of healthcare, which is the business of curing people once we have failed on the prevention. We need to recognize the dominant role of the private healthcare system in India. There is a well-developed toolkit in the field of state capacity in India about market failure and state capacity. Our friends at Scotch, who have organized this conference, have a long history of working in these areas, and they can be valuable participants in this conversation of the systematic process of public economics and public administration. We should always be asking four questions. What's the market failure? What are the effective interventions through which we can address market failures? How would we design government agencies? How would we be cognizant of public choice theory and have a skeptical approach to the incentives of the personnel that man government? How would we design the laws? How would we draft the laws? And how would we develop organizations that effectively enforce these laws? Thank you. I'm at the end of this talk and I'm happy to go in any direction chosen by the organizers.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shah. This was quite interesting.